In 2023, a single Hermès pop-up event in Shanghai generated a waitlist of 40,000 people in 72 hours. No product was guaranteed, no price was discounted, no celebrity appeared. Just the name, the address, and the date. 40,000 people responded to 3 pieces of information, not because the bag is worth what it costs, because the system behind the bag has been running in Asia for 30 years, engineering exactly that response, in exactly that demographic, with a precision that most governments would envy. This is how it works. Please subscribe and activate the button to help us reach 1,000 subscribers so we can bring you more relevant content, and so YouTube can notify you when we publish new videos. Asia changed everything the luxury world thought it understood about desire. Not because Asian consumers behave irrationally. The opposite is true. The rapid, deep, structurally significant penetration of European luxury brands into markets across China, Singapore, Japan, South Korea, and Southeast Asia over the last 3 decades is not the story of aspirational consumers passively absorbing a foreign cultural product. It is the story of a sophisticated engineering project meeting a specific set of social conditions that made its outcomes more powerful, more concentrated, and more commercially significant than anything the same project had produced in its original Western context. The social conditions matter. Understanding them is the prerequisite for understanding everything else in this video. In markets shaped by Confucian social philosophy, where hierarchy is not merely accepted but understood as the natural and correct organization of human relationships, where the marking of social position is a communication duty rather than a vanity, where the ability to read and send status signals is a genuine social competency developed from childhood, the luxury brand did not need to install a new value system. It needed only to attach itself to a value system that was already operating at full power. The value system said, "Your position in the hierarchy is real, significant, and worth communicating clearly to everyone in your social world." The luxury brand said, "We have the most legible instruments available for that communication." The combination produced something that the brand's original architects, designing for a Western context, where status signaling carries more ambivalence and more social friction, had never fully anticipated. It produced consumers who were not merely willing to pay for the signal. They were culturally equipped to use it with a precision and a sophistication that European consumers, operating in a cultural environment with more complicated feelings about visible hierarchy, frequently were not. The Singaporean banker who wears a specific watch configuration to a specific meeting is not performing status anxiety. He is conducting a professional communication that his counterpart across the table will read with accuracy, in the correct register, without any of the social discomfort that the same communication might generate in a London boardroom or a New York investment firm. The signal is sent and received cleanly, in a context that treats the signal as legitimate and the ability to send it as evidence of competence. The luxury brands discovered this and adapted their strategies accordingly, or more precisely, the brands that survived and dominated in Asia were the ones that understood the adaptation required and executed it without compromising the core architecture of exclusivity that made the signal worth sending. That adaptation is not what most external analysis of luxury in Asia focuses on. The external analysis focuses on scale, on the numbers, the growth rates, the market share figures that reflect the commercial success of the penetration. The more consequential story is about the depth of the integration, about how completely the European luxury signal has been absorbed into the social infrastructure of status communication across the region's most consequent markets, in ways that make the brands not merely commercially successful but culturally load-bearing. The luxury brand in Singapore is not selling a product to a market. It has become part of the language through which the market understands itself, part of the vocabulary with which professionals communicate competence, families signal stability, and individuals mark the transitions, the promotion, the partnership, the generational transfer of wealth that their culture treats as worthy of commemoration in durable, visible form. When your product becomes part of a culture's language, you are no longer competing with other products. You are competing with the idea of communicating differently. And that competition, in a culture where the language has been fully internalized, is not a competition at all. The brands that reached this level of integration in Asian markets have something that no new entrant can purchase and no marketing campaign can replicate. They have the specific, compounding, self-reinforcing advantage of being the established vocabulary In a market that values vocabulary stability above almost everything, changing the luxury vocabulary requires convincing an entire social infrastructure, not just individual consumers, but the complete network of relationships through which social assessments are made and communicated, that the new vocabulary is legitimate, that it carries real meaning, that using it will produce the social outcomes that the existing vocabulary produces reliably. That convincing takes decades. The established brands have already done it. The game, for the entrants who do not understand this, has already been played. The scarcity architecture that luxury empires deploy in Asian markets is not the same architecture they use in Europe. The populations are different, the social dynamics are different, the specific psychological mechanisms through which scarcity produces desire are calibrated to different cultural operating systems. Understanding the adaptation, the specific ways in which the global scarcity strategy has been modified for the Asian context, is essential to understanding why it works as powerfully as it does. In European luxury markets, scarcity functions primarily through the mechanism of refinement. The signal communicated by a scarce object is, "This is for people of genuine discernment, who understand what is rare and why rarity matters, who have cultivated the specific aesthetic and historical knowledge that makes this object meaningful." The scarcity filters for cultivation. It excludes people who lack the cultural formation to recognize what the object represents, regardless of whether they have the financial capacity to acquire it. In Asian markets, scarcity functions with additional dimensions that the European mechanism does not fully capture. It functions through the mechanism of competitive selection, the signal that you were chosen, that the allocation process evaluated you and found you worthy, that your receipt of the scarce object reflects not just your financial capacity but your standing in a specific hierarchy that the brand administers and that the culture respects. The difference is subtle but commercially significant. The European mechanism filters passively. You either have the cultivation or you do not, and the brand's role is to maintain the standards that make the filter accurate. The Asian mechanism filters actively. The brand makes visible decisions about who receives access, communicates those decisions through the allocation process itself, and produces in the recipient a specific experience of being selected that generates a quality and intensity of loyalty that passive filtering never approaches. Hermès understood this earlier, and more completely than any other European luxury house operating in Asia. The practice of requiring purchase history before Birkin allocation, which in the European context functions primarily as a quality filter, ensuring that the object goes to genuine enthusiasts rather than speculators, in the Asian context functions simultaneously as a competitive selection process that the recipient experiences as an achievement, a status confirmation, and an affiliation with a specific community of people who have met the same standard. The bag is the credential. The allocation process is the examination. And the examination, because it is administered by an institution with genuine cultural authority in the market, produces a credential that carries weight in the specific social contexts where weight matters most. This architecture has been studied and replicated, with varying degrees of success, across every luxury category operating in Asia. The limited edition release timed to a specific cultural calendar, the Lunar New Year collection, the anniversary edition coordinated with a heritage narrative specific to the regional market, is not simply a product marketing decision. It is a social calendar management decision, inserting the brand's scarcity moments into the rhythm of cultural life at exactly the points where the culture's appetite for meaningful objects and status signals is most acute. The brands that have mastered this calendar management have achieved something that most marketing theory does not have adequate language for. They have made their scarcity events part of the cultural anticipation cycle, expected, planned for, discussed in advance and reviewed in retrospect, in the way that cultural festivals are anticipated and reviewed. The brand's limited release is not a commercial event that the culture observes. It is a cultural event that the brand orchestrates. And here is the mechanism that makes this orchestration self-reinforcing in ways that no single brand decision could produce alone. The secondary market in Asia for significant luxury pieces is not merely a resale ecosystem. It is a social validation infrastructure. Every secondary market transaction that prices a piece above its retail value is a public confirmation that the original allocation was a good decision, that the person who received the allocation made a correct judgment at the moment of acquisition, that their ability to recognize what was worth wanting before the secondary market confirmed it is evidence of the specific discernment that the brand's allocation process was designed to select for. The secondary market premium tells the original buyer, "You were right. Your judgment was correct." The culture agrees with the decision that the brand made when it decided you were the right person for this piece. That validation compounds. It deepens the relationship with the brand, it reinforces the orientation toward the next allocation, and it communicates to everyone in the buyer's social world who can read the secondary market signal that this person's relationship with the brand is one of substantive knowledge rather than casual aspiration. The desire the brand engineered has become self-sustaining. The system is running on its own momentum. The private-client relationship is where luxury empires in Asia exercise their most sophisticated and most consequential form of influence, and where the distance between what the public-facing brand communicates and what actually happens is greatest. The private client, at the level we are discussing, is not a high-spending customer who receives better service. The private-client relationship is a specifically constructed, carefully maintained, bilaterally invested social architecture through which the brand and the individual create a mutual dependency that serves both parties' interests in ways that neither would describe publicly. For the brand, the private-client relationship provides several things simultaneously. Direct access to one of the most commercially significant individuals in the market, someone who's spending, whose social influence, and whose brand advocacy within the networks that matter most to the brand's positioning are all genuinely consequential. A real-time intelligence channel providing information about what the market's most informed participants are thinking, noticing, and responding to before that information is visible in any formal data set. And the specific social legitimacy that comes from having the right people, in the right contexts, in a genuine relationship with the brand rather than a transactional one. For the private client, the relationship provides access to products before public availability, to events that do not appear on any public calendar, to the specific form of recognition that comes from being known, by name and by preference, by an institution with genuine cultural authority. But more importantly, it provides something that the visible dimensions of the relationship do not fully capture. It provides a position. The private client of a significant luxury house in Singapore is not simply a customer with premium access. They are a member of a social category that is recognized, without announcement, across every context in which the markers of that membership are legible. The watches were allocated before public release, the piece that exists in fewer than 50 versions globally. The relationship with the brand that produces invitations to events that most of the brand's customers do not know exist. Each of these is a signal, readable by the right audience, communicating, with a precision that no explicit status claim could match, exactly where the individual stands in the hierarchy that the brand maintains and that the culture respects. The luxury empire in Asia is not simply managing customer relationships. It is managing a social hierarchy, deciding, through the allocation of access and recognition, who belongs at which level of a status architecture that has real consequences in the professional and social lives of the people whose position within it matters to them. This management function, the brand as administrator of social position, is the deepest form of influence available to any commercial institution. It converts the brand from a product supplier into something closer to a credentialing authority, an institution whose assessment of an individual's standing in the relevant community carries genuine weight in that community's own self-understanding. The brands that have achieved this status in Asian markets hold power that is, in its practical consequences, considerably more significant than their commercial power alone would suggest. The decision about who receives what allocation, when, through which relationship, with what communication about the meaning of the access, that decision is being made by people who understand that they are not managing inventory. They are managing a social order. And the people whose position within that social order depends on the brand's continued recognition of their standing have an interest in the brand's continued authority that goes well beyond any preference for the product itself. The brand's power is secured not by the quality of what it makes, but by the degree to which its assessments of human worth have been integrated into the self-understanding of the people it assesses. Once that integration is complete, once the brand's recognition has become part of how an individual understands their own position, and once the social world that individual inhabits has accepted the brand's assessments as legitimate, the relationship has moved past commerce entirely. It has become social infrastructure. And social infrastructure, once embedded deeply enough in the daily operation of a community's self-organization, is the most durable thing that any institution can build. The luxury empire that has become social infrastructure in a market does not need to compete. It needs only to continue. Everything we have examined, the cultural integration, the scarcity architecture, the private client hierarchy, is how luxury empires in Asia built their dominance. But there is a dimension that operates beneath all of it, a mechanism that is older than any brand and more powerful than any marketing strategy. What comes next explains why the system keeps working even when people know it is a system. Here is the reversal that changes everything. The luxury system in Asia does not work on consumers. It works on humans. And the distinction matters enormously because the framework of consumer psychology, which treats the person as a rational actor making decisions about products in response to signals and incentives, consistently fails to explain the depth and durability of the luxury attachment that the most sophisticated empires have produced in Asian markets. The depth is not a consumer phenomenon. It is a human one, rooted in needs and mechanisms that predate commerce, predate branding, predate every marketing framework that has ever been developed to explain why people buy what they buy. The need to belong, the need to be recognized, the need to mark the significant moments of a life in ways that the community can witness and validate, the need to carry, in physical form, some evidence of what has been built, earned, and survived. These are not consumer preferences, they are human requirements, present across every culture, every era, every economic system that has ever organized human social life. The luxury empire in Asia did not create these needs. It found them, operating at full power in cultures with long, sophisticated traditions of using objects to communicate social meaning, and built a system for meeting them with extraordinary precision. The Singaporean executive who acquires a specific piece at a specific moment in their career is not making a consumer decision. They are performing a ritual, marking a transition, a professional achievement, a generational milestone, a moment of arrival that the culture treats as deserving commemoration in a form that the community will recognize and respond to appropriately. The object is the ritual instrument. The brand is the institution that certifies the instrument's legitimacy, and the community is the audience whose recognition of the ritual's meaning gives it the social force that the individual performing it is seeking. This is not manipulation in any simple sense. The need is genuine, the marking is meaningful, the community's recognition is real. The luxury empire did not manufacture any of these elements. It positioned itself as the provider of the instruments through which genuine human needs are met in a socially legible way. The power of this positioning is that it makes the system's commercial dimension feel, to the people inside it, like a secondary feature of a primarily human transaction. You are not buying a product. You are marking a moment. The price is not the cost of the object. It is the measure of the moment's significance. That reframing of the commercial transaction into a human one is the deepest form of desire engineering available. And the luxury empires that have executed it most completely in Asian markets have achieved a position that is essentially immune to the forms of challenge that conventional commercial competition can mount. You cannot disrupt a ritual. You can only replace it with a better ritual. And replacing a ritual requires not a better product but a deeper understanding of the human needs the ritual meets, combined with the institutional authority to certify that your instruments are adequate to meet them. Building that authority takes generations. The established brands have already built it. Now watch how this ritual positioning extends beyond the individual transaction into the collective cultural dimension, because this is where the luxury empire's influence over Asian markets becomes genuinely systemic. The culture in which specific brands are the established ritual instruments for marking specific types of social transition develops, over time, a relationship with those brands that operates independently of any individual's preference. The brand becomes woven into the culture's self-understanding, into the stories the culture tells about success, achievement, arrival, and the specific form of human excellence that the culture values most highly. The child growing up in Singapore today is absorbing, through the ambient culture of their family and social world, a specific understanding of which objects are appropriate to which moments, which brands certify which types of achievement, and what the presence of specific luxury markers in someone's life communicates about that person's position in the social hierarchy. They are learning, before they are old enough to be consumers, the vocabulary of a signaling system that they will spend their productive lives navigating and participating in. That early formation is the luxury empire's most durable investment. Not the campaign, not the event, not the private client relationship, though all of those matter. The cultural formation that happens before anyone is making purchasing decisions through the ambient social environment that the brand's decades of presence in the market have shaped. The desire is installed in childhood. The commerce collects it in adulthood. And the cycle continues across generations with the self-reinforcing momentum of a system that has become too deeply integrated into the culture's self-understanding to be extracted without dismantling something the culture values more than any individual brand. There is a point in the development of every luxury empire's position in an Asian market that is, in retrospect, clearly identifiable as the moment the game changed. The moment the brand stopped fighting for market share and started administering a social order. The moment the commercial competition became irrelevant because the real competition for cultural authority, for ritual legitimacy, for the specific social function that no commercial framework fully captures, had already been won. Reaching that point requires things that most commercial organizations are not built to sustain. Not financial resources alone. The resources are necessary but not sufficient. Not marketing sophistication. The sophistication helps but does not produce the outcome independently. What is required is the specific, patient, generation-spanning consistency of identity that allows a brand to be the same thing, in the same register, with the same meaning, across long enough that the culture stops treating it as a commercial actor and starts treating it as a permanent feature of the social landscape. Consistency across time is the rarest capability in commercial culture, because commercial culture is structured to reward adaptation, to respond to market feedback, to adjust to changing consumer preferences, to evolve the product and the positioning in response to the signals that the market provides. This responsiveness is genuinely valuable. It is also, in the specific context of building the cultural authority that the luxury empire requires, potentially destructive. Because cultural authority requires recognizability. The brand that changes to meet every new preference is a brand that cannot be trusted to mean the same thing tomorrow that it means today. And the ritual instrument that cannot be trusted to mean the same thing tomorrow is not a reliable instrument for marking moments that the participants want the culture to remember and respond to consistently. The luxury empire that has built genuine cultural authority in Asian markets has done so by being, to a degree that impresses and occasionally frustrates external observers, almost resistant to change in its core identity. The product evolves, the campaigns are updated, the private client relationships are managed with sensitivity to current social conditions. But the essential character, the specific quality of what the brand means, the specific position in the social hierarchy it certifies, the specific human need it meets, and the specific ritual function it performs, that does not change. It is protected. With a discipline and a ferocity that reflects the understanding, at the highest levels of these organizations, that the cultural authority is the actual asset. And that asset is maintained not by investment but by consistency. Not by what you add, but by what you refuse to change. For everyone outside the system, the aspirational consumer building toward their first significant acquisition, the entrepreneur trying to understand how brand value of this magnitude is created, the analyst trying to map the competitive dynamics of a market where the traditional tools produce incomplete pictures, the most useful thing to take from this analysis is the recognition that the luxury empire in Asia is not competing in the same arena as most commercial organizations. It is operating in the arena of culture, of ritual, of the human needs that commerce meets most durably when it stops trying to be commerce and starts being something that the human beings it serves actually need. That arena has different rules, different metrics of success, different time horizons for the investments that produce the outcomes, and different competitive dynamics because the barriers to entry are not financial or technological but cultural and temporal, built through presence, consistency, and the slow accumulation of social authority that can only be earned, never purchased. The brands that have won in that arena did not win by being the best products. They won by being the most reliable instruments for meeting needs that the cultures they operate in treat as permanently important. And the cultures they operate in, the rapidly growing, increasingly wealthy, deeply sophisticated consumer societies of Asia, have shown no signs of deciding that the needs are less important than they were. If anything, the opposite. The more complex the social landscape becomes, the more valuable the reliable signal. The more rapidly wealth is created and redistributed, the more important the established vocabulary for communicating what the wealth means. The more competitive the professional and social environments where position matters, the more consequential the instruments that mark position accurately and legibly. The luxury empire in Asia is not riding a trend. It is managing a permanent feature of how human beings organize their social lives, one that becomes more important, not less, as the societies it operates in become more complex. The desire was always there. The empire simply learned to speak its language, fluently, permanently, and in a register that no amount of competitive pressure has ever successfully displaced. Luxury power exists for one reason only: to reveal what the elite pay to hide. Subscribe to Luxury Power and hit the bell now. Every week, a new secret is uncovered. Drop in the comments where you're watching from. We love knowing our global audience. Everything you saw here is based on real cases, verified contracts, and documented facts. We don't glorify wealth, we dissect it. Do you still think money buys freedom? Tell us in the comments. Share this with someone who needs to see the truth. And remember, even the most expensive life can be a gilded cage. See you in the next video.